Well, welcome everybody, and a special welcome to the high school students who have come today. I just want to call out the fact that Oracle is one of our most important sponsors across the board, whether it's their EVP who helped us launch our MS in Business Analytics and has sponsored multiple projects, to supporting students to go to events in Boston, to hosting students on the campus, to being the platinum sponsor for today, and sits on our advisory council. There's just an abundance of ways that they've made us a better institution than we could ever be by ourselves. So I'm deeply thankful for Oracle's support, as well as the support of our other sponsors today.
Now with that, I'm going to invite my friend Jessica to join us. Now remember, Jessica is our controller at Stitch Fix. So we spent a little bit of time talking about the why, and now we're going to talk a little bit about the what, and go through with you 5, there's another number for you, 5 skills that might be things that you think about as you're defining your destiny and building your future. So from the why to a little bit about the what. I was interviewed for a Forbes article a bit ago and asked what kinds of skills millennials should be focused on as they want to move their careers forward. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through those 5 skills, and we're going to get Jessica's take on those and see how they've been important in her career. Sound like a plan?
Let's do it.
Sounds like a plan. All right, so let's start with number 1. So the first one is get a variety of experiences. So my thinking on this was it's really important to have as broad an experience as possible, different geographies, different kinds of businesses, different attitudes, cultural awareness, all of those kinds of things really are important as you're trying to build your career. So Jessica, I know you have had a variety of experience in your career. Can you share a little bit about why those have been important as you've grown in your career?
No, absolutely. I've always leaned into industries where there's been disruption. So if you look at kind of my career, it's been spanning healthcare and spanning retail. And I think both of those industries are really facing disruption right now. And so you can have a core role, right? Like in finance, I went into Kaiser as a finance director, but I knew that there were going to be a lot of stretch opportunities and experiences that I could raise my hand to that would give you kind of this opportunity to drive different types of change. So I did that for 5 years at Kaiser, and I led initiatives around cost transformation and transforming orgs. And then I went to business school during that time, which reconnected me with my passion for retail. So all of my clients while I was in consulting were all consumer business retail. And then ended up, after business school, going to Gymboree, where I was the controller for 2 years, and as Scott said, led that team through about 90% of its bankruptcy. And then more recently came over to Stitch Fix to lead their IPO. I joined Stitch Fix 3 months before the IPO, and I had never had IPO experience, and it was kind of like that depth and breadth of experiences that built the competencies necessary for me to have the confidence to jump in and lead during that very exciting time.
So number 2 is really looking at supplementing the tech skills that we know you all have. You're definitely a digital generation with some soft skills. Certainly that's one that's important to me, understanding people, behavior, what motivates them, what inspires them, and how critical that is for leadership. And I know certainly for you, as someone who cares a lot about change and disruption and transformation, how have those soft skills and understanding behavior really been critical for your success?
Any problem, 70 to 80% of it, I would say, is the people aspect of it, right? And so, and that, I kind of can take that back to every level of my career. When I was a staff accountant, senior accountant at Arthur Andersen, I think building relationships with my clients, really building real, authentic, meaningful relationships, helped me to avoid the friction that could sometimes come up when you needed to get documents from them to get your job done. And I think for me, that ultimately kind of came to, built an eminence for me, within Arthur Andersen and ultimately in Deloitte, that I then became the girl that anytime there was a client where there was, a bad relationship or there was, a problem, they would throw me on it because they knew I could, navigate that relationship piece of it. I think as I've kind of grown up in more leadership roles outside of public accounting, navigating, when I was at Kaiser, navigating cost transformation across a $60 billion organization. We had this goal that we were going to drive $7 billion of costs out of the organization over a 3-year period. And that involved 7 different regions, 7 different regional presidents who had very different priorities and beliefs and needs for their organization. And being able to kind of navigate the people aspect of it, I think was really critical to that success. One of the things that I really love about Stitch Fix, we have a hiring standard. And it is bright, kind, and goal-oriented. And I think that, for me, Stitch Fix, I think the culture and the environment is very different from any other organization I've ever worked in. It's definitely a kinder culture, especially in finance, where there's a lot of stories out there about people not exhibiting good behaviors. And so when I describe bright, kind, goal-oriented, people kind of hit bright up against bright up against smart. So bright kind of layers in the EQ aspect of smart, right? And I think really you can have really strong technical skills, but if you don't have that EQ piece, I think navigating business can be really, really, really challenging.
Number 3 is really to focus on 2 key communication skills, writing and listening. And in my thinking on these 2 skills, sort of at this juncture of what we're seeing in terms of the workforce, is that writing has become really critical to do in a very succinct, very clear, very concise manner. So if you look at the kinds of writing that we're doing in business now, some of it is the social media pieces, being able to tweet effectively. It's in the collaboration, communication that you do internally at a company as well as externally. And people don't spend a lot of time reading things in depth. And so your ability to really write clearly and concisely becomes really important. And the second piece is listening. It sort of goes back to that first skill with that broad viewpoint, but listening becomes really important when you need to sort of hear voices from lots of different areas, whether those are competitors, different markets, different consumers, different individuals, within your own company, and navigate all of that. To be able to really get to some of that understanding behavior, you have to have good listening skills and then be able to synthesize what you're hearing in a cogent manner. And so those are sort of my 2 in terms of key skills, but how have they played out for you and what you've been trying to accomplish?
I think it goes back to the EQ though too, right? Really being able to you have to really excel in those skills. And that's why I think really having a strong liberal arts background and really honing in on writing skills, especially where you guys are right now, is really, really critical. And you're gonna use it every day in every aspect of your career. Again, to bring it kind of more close to earlier in my career, and within the accounting world and in the audit world, being able to write very succinct technical memos. I know it doesn't sound very sexy, but it was part of my job. But it was also critical not just to kind of get the facts on paper, but when we had client issues, being able to have a memo that you could navigate through a national office consultation and it not take weeks and weeks on end and where it was going to frustrate the client was critical. And I think really being able to have really solid writing skills to that regard was really important very early in my career. And navigating change initiatives, especially when you're dealing with cross-functional teams, the ability to really listen and understand what people's needs are and what their wants are and what their stakes are in the game is really critical. So one of the current projects that I'm leading right now at Stitch Fix is I've been put over building a fraud and shrink strategy. And so this is my first opportunity to work in a tech company, right? I've kind of grown up within, healthcare, retail, but very traditional brick and mortar retail. And so a fraud shrink strategy at Gymboree was really primarily about how do you keep people from stealing clothes out of your store, right? Now we have to deal with, how do we predict which clients put risk to the organization? And that's a very different game that I don't necessarily have the technical experience to do. And so I've got a cross-functional team that's the client experience team, I've got engineers, I've got our data scientists, I've got the finance team and our security team. And all of those people think very differently, they're motivated by very different things. And so I've really had to spend time doing a listening campaign to understand what are your needs in this, what do you want from here, how can I motivate you so that we can really get the team aligned and move forward.
Yeah. So skill number 4 is taking time for self-reflection. I talked about this a little bit. I think particularly as you're looking for skills, as you're moving your career forward, one of the areas of self-reflection to consider is how you make decisions and understanding how that works for you. Are you the kind of person that does a lot of listening, thinks a lot, reflects a lot, and then sort of throws things out, expecting, sort of some feedback on that, and, that's your decision-making style? Or you are the quick decision, it's okay if I screwed up and I fail, I'll just fix it as I go kind of person? Because I think understanding that really helps you navigate your leadership as you're moving through an organization, and also allows you to make sure you're in places where you have a good fit for that decision-making style. So it's both a self-reflection from a what's right for me as well as what's right in the organization. But all kinds of self-reflection, I think, are really important as you move your career forward. And I know you've done some as you sort of navigated some career decisions. So maybe you could share that a little bit with everyone.
So, and I think my story is a little bit different. So when I was in your shoes, I actually got married while I was at UC Berkeley, and I had my first child while I was at UC Berkeley. So I started public accounting. I was the only person in my start class with a two-year-old son. And so, at that point, this successful executive finance leader, I spent quite a bit of time with that goal being partner. And that was really what I aligned myself with and really where I thought the vision was going. And in 2010, I kind of had a perfect storm of events. I was divorced. I had gotten divorced 3 years earlier. I was working 100-hour weeks, trying to make partner. I was diagnosed with diabetes. My daughter, who was in the 2nd grade at the time, started having learning challenges, and it was impacting her self-esteem. And my son was applying to high school at the time. And I really had to pause and say, okay, I know that I think this is the vision and this is what needs to happen, but this is not aligned with my values. And my family kind of comes at the top of my value set. That is like the most important thing. And my health is pretty high up there too. And so things were really in conflict. And so that's the year 2010 that I made the decision to leave public accounting. And I went to Kaiser, and so that was a little bit different. So all of my experience up till then had really been in the retail and consumer business space. And so the Kaiser decision for me was really about work-life balance, and I needed to get some balance to be able to really hone in on the things that were really, really important to me. And so I went to Kaiser. I got every single bit of work-life balance that I needed, and got kind of the home front under control. But it did give me, for the first time in my career, because remember I had a young child when I was in college. Everything had been about, being a mother and being a professional. And I had never really spent time for me. And so I got 2 really good pieces of advice during that time. So my CFO at Kaiser and a partner from Deloitte, who I'm still friends with, both said separately, Jessica, why don't you pause, and rather than use, I had, all this work-life balance, this new space to go get to kind of go hard for that next role, why don't you pause and go back and get your MBA? And so that's when I made the decision to do my MBA program. And I will say it brought clarity to so many things for me, both from a work perspective and from just understanding what it is that I wanted, getting back in line with my personal vision. So while I was at Kaiser and in MBA school, I think a couple things became very clear. The first thing was that I had a passion for retail. I did. Everything in my MBA classes was all about like this inflection point that retail's at right now, and kind of what's happening between brick and mortar and omni, and I wanted to be a part of that. I think the other thing that I learned is I really like driving change. I like driving change quickly, and I wanted to do that in a smaller organization.
One of the things I think is wonderful in that story is your approach to education being about what you needed and for yourself. And I think that's a really good lesson learned for any of you that are thinking about graduate school in the future is to realize that can be a very good benefit for you as yourself. Doing it for yourself, I think, is a great reason to be doing graduate school. All right, so now we get number 5, which is to really focus on executing, not the big ideas. This is one of those things that People complain about millennials. I rarely complain about millennials. I think it's a wonderful generation. We have high expectations of what you guys are going to be able to accomplish and contribute. You're coming with great ideas on new ways to do things. You're not letting the status quo stand in your way at all. And I think that's really, really fantastic. But one of the things to really hone down in terms of skills is the ability to not just come with a big idea, but come with a plan of action. To be able to understand how to create a plan, to think about how to use data to back up all your great big ideas and bring those and then begin executing against a plan. I think it's a fantastic skill that I think we all learn as we grow in our careers. So how has that really been a part of your success in your career?
And I think I've learned over time, I apply frameworks to everything. I don't think I knew that I was applying frameworks to everything, but now it's clear to me. I apply frameworks to everything. So I think when it comes to execution, I have vision, action, value. That's kind of the framework I apply. And I think, so we kind of talked a little bit about my career journey, right? And I think that there was a vision. I didn't know it was a vision, but I think that vision of being a successful executive finance leader was the vision. And then creating the action items that are going to deliver value on the back end. And so I can give two very good examples of that. So at that inflection point when I was at Kaiser and the CFO, he told me to consider going back and getting my MBA. He also said, Jessica, you need a personal strategic plan. And at that point I was like, okay, what is that? Can you show me yours? I have no idea what this thing is. And he was just like, well, when I was your age, I had it, and I had already updated mine 2 or 3 times. So you're kind of behind the 8 ball on this thing. And he refused to share his because he wanted me to bring creativity with mine. So I actually did. I put together a PowerPoint deck, and I said, here's this goal. And at the time, I thought, again, this also is a key point. I think as you're going through your career, the vision, like I said, I knew the intent, but there was a point that I thought it was a partner. There was a point that I thought I was going to be an SVP at Kaiser. So at that point, it was SVP at Kaiser. So I got the job description for a couple of different SVP and finance roles, and I read them. And I said, okay, then I created a gap analysis, and I said, well, here is my resume, here's what's happened from an education perspective, what I have today, here's where I need to get, and here's what I'm going to need to do. And then I kind of created the action items from an experience, education, and exposure perspective that was going to get me there. And so that was kind of another piece of me making the decision to go back and get my MBA. I also kind of clearly mapped out, okay, if I want to be a SVP at Kaiser, what are the different roles that could get me there? Because it's not, a linear path. It could be through controller, it could be VP of FP&A, it could be a CFO in a different region. So there were a lot of different opportunities. So I just wanted to be clear that I kind of understood that. And I think the other thing in driving your career that was in my action plan is it's not just the specific role, it's the exposure. So how do you get exposure to things while you're in your role? I'm a controller. A lot of people could look at that and say, that's not a typical path to CFO. But when you look at the experience that I've layered on top of that, so when I was at Kaiser, I'd raise my hand for stretch opportunities. Can I go rotate with the CFO in one of the hospitals so that I can get closer to healthcare? Sure. Can I, get out the cost transformation piece? That was me raising my hand saying, I'm really good at driving change. I'd love to do something on a broader level. And so I think those things kind of then layer on. So that's kind of the personal strategic plan aspect to that. From a work perspective, I think it's very clear with every team that I'm leading to create a very crystal clear vision of what the goal looks like in the end. And so right now, the work that I'm really excited that we're doing at Stitch Fix is really creating we're calling it the Finance OS. So our Stitch Fix operating values, our value system, our leadership values, it's the Stitch Fix OS, so the operating system. So we're in the process of creating the Finance OS. And I think, for finance right now, it is also in an inflection point. I think within the next, year or two, right, people are anticipating that 30% of finance roles as they exist today will not be here anymore because of automation, robotics, and so there's change happening. And so I think what we're really leading our team to right now is helping our team understand they are in the driver's seats. This is not something that's going to happen to them. And we're going to create a roadmap to help us get the whole finance organization from a transactional capability to something that's more transformational. And so again, we're kind of using that vision back action value framework, creating a vision and a roadmap for the team that's going to help really make sure that we execute on that goal.
Yeah. All right. With that, we are going to thank you very much for your time. attentiveness,